think we'll get going. So welcome everyone to today's Seizing the Moment online session that's titled today, Building a Post-Pandemic Network, Working Together to Transform Communities. This webinar, it's part of our project titled Seizing the Moment, Exploring Just and Sustainable Pandemic Recovery through Community Campus Partnerships, which is led by the Community Engagement and Research Centre at the University of Regina and Community Campus Engage Canada. I am Magda Gomans, and I'm manager at Community Campus Engage Canada. And Lynn Gidluck and Amber Fletcher, the Community Director and Academic Director at the University of Regina's Community Engagement and Research Centre, are also joining us today. So welcome, Amber and Lynn. And I'm really pleased to be speaking to you today from my home office here in Ottawa, which is located on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. So I'll just start by mentioning a bit about Community Campus Engage Canada. We are building a national network and knowledge sharing community, essentially spaces to connect, spaces for conversation, for capacity building, for collective action, for participants in community campus research and learning partnerships across Canada. And our focus is on supporting community-driven partnerships for social impact. And if you'd like to learn more about our organization, you can visit our website at ccecanada.ca, and there will be some links added in the chat box throughout this hour for some more information as well. So during today's session, we're going to explore how to strengthen our network of Seizing the Moment project participants and support continuing conversations, ongoing and meaningful conversation among community and campus partners and activities as well to respond to evolving pandemic contexts across Canada. In a few moments, I'll invite Jo Hall, Director of Simon Fraser University's Vancity Office of Community Engagement and co-director of SFU's Community Engage Research Centre, to lead today's activities. So during the first part of today's webinar, we're going to have a great opportunity to learn from the experiences of network builders that are active across the country with today's panelists from City Studio, Vancouver, Dwayne Elverum, Alex Lineker, and Suparna Gupta. Also joining us are Sarah Matsushito, Director of Communications and Engagement for the Ontario Nonprofit Network, Elena Harrison, Director of Strategic Initiatives with Inclusion Saskatchewan, and Robin East, founder of Barrier Free Saskatchewan. They've been asked to reflect on the guiding questions for today's conversation, particularly the first questions, which include, what can we learn from other successful networks to grow an effective knowledge sharing community among Seizing the Moment participants? And essentially, what are the ingredients for success and what are some cautions as well? And then after that, Anne will open the conversation to all of you so that you have a chance to share your thoughts about today's themes. These themes also include some additional questions for us to think about, like who will be involved in the Seizing the Moment network and how may we best connect? And essentially, what are our next steps to addressing pandemic and post-pandemic concerns in communities? So before I hand things over, I'm just going to take a moment to speak about the Seizing the Moment project in general. As many of you likely know, the Seizing the Moment project is a year-long initiative that involves a series of outreach activities that we've been having over these last few months. First off, we had a 2-day workshop that was held in May. We have an upcoming Quebec-based French language workshop to be held on November 18th, with some more details coming soon, and a series of post-workshop webinars. And this session today is the third in that series. And we have an ongoing project webpage to keep the conversation going as well. And we'll have a link to that webpage in the chat as well. And this project, it's funded by a Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council Connection Grant. So the Seizing the Moment project in general, we're essentially trying to make space for discussion around, several questions that include what types of challenges are communities and community-based organizations experiencing, and how are they building paths forward, and how might pandemic or broader systemic challenges be addressed through research, learning, and creative partnerships between communities and post-secondary institutions. And we've had some really amazing participation to date in the Seizing the Moment project. In our May workshop, we had almost 400 people registered. So we had some wonderful conversations during that workshop over 2 days. We've had so far with these post-workshop webinars, over 200 individuals registered to participate. We've had dozens of presenters in our national workshop presentations, as part of regional discussions that we've had as well, and within these post-workshop webinars. And we've had a large number of community, campus, and boundary spanning representatives involved in planning all of these events. As you might imagine, there's been a lot of conversation around that too, as well as many who have shared stories on our project webpage. And so many of these participants in all of these activities, they've let us know again and again that they've really appreciated these opportunities to build these kinds of connections with others locally and across the country. They certainly recognize these conversations as valued avenues to share stories and knowledge and consider ways forward together collaboratively. I know that in our regional workshop discussions, it involved presenters from a variety of sectors, arts installations representing arts groups, Indigenous partnerships, community health centers, urban farms, affordable housing advocates, Black student associations, and the list goes on and on. And so they, we've taken a look at what's been said so far along the way, and there have been many comments made related to network building and building a strong group among us to share knowledge. And so they've spoken about the changing waves we've connected over the past year and a half, initially from a loss of sense of community, from that loss of physical gathering spaces, but then thinking about new ways of reaching others online, new audiences, new ways of connecting. They've also spoken about that great value of existing deep relationships that have been built over time in responding to crises and responding to challenges, and how strengthening those relationships is really important. And they've also talked about that desire to build ongoing connections across the country and in local spaces. So today we aim to continue that conversation, and we'd like to focus on options to build a stronger network and knowledge sharing community through this conversation. So now I'm very happy to welcome our moderator for today's event, Joe Hall. Is Director of Simon Fraser University's Vancity Office of Community Engagement and co-director of SFU's Community Engage Research Center. He's an associate of SFU's Institute for the Humanities and an associate with SFU's Center for Dialogue. He's been a visiting professor with SFU's Semester for Dialogue. Is a co-founder of UBC's Humanities 101 program. In 2015, he published Ecological Metapolitics, Badiou and the Anthropocene, and in 2018, co-authored Global Warming and the Sweetness of Life, A Tar Sands Tale. So welcome, Anne. Thanks so much for leading our discussion today.
Thank you so much, Magda. Wonderful to be with you all. This I'm coming to you from East Vancouver, the territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh peoples. The conversations we're embarking on today is something I think we've all had in private with our colleagues at the university, with social activists, with people doing work in civil society, artists, designers, many others, and hope to keep this conversation going. And I think CCEC for me has provided a really important national network to look at what people are doing at other cities, and hope that this place can be a platform where these conversations can be ongoing. And thank you, Magda, for introducing the panelists already. The fuller bios for our panelists are on the CCEC website. So in the interest of time, I might jump to it so we get a chance to get into a discussion. First, we have the City Studio Group with Dwayne Alvirum, Alex Lineker, and Suparna Gupta. Please join us in sharing your thoughts.
Thanks, Am, and thanks, Magda. Yeah, I'm here with Alex. Can you give a wave, Alex? I'm not sure if you saw that. And then Suparna is here. Alex is leading our business development, and Suparna's leading and coordinating our marketing activities. This is such an important conversation for us, not only as a result of the things we're learning about the pandemic, but as part of a very long arc that we've been working in and with around what is a network and what can a network be, especially in Canada. I've been in the university scene for more than 20 years, and we belong to a lot of networks, but I've never found my network experience in Canada to be particularly stimulating, I would say. It's always been a challenge to find a really positive and kind of joyful network experience. And so when we started the City Studio Network, we thought this would be the goal, to kind of see if we can develop a network that has a thriving quality to it, and in a way provide an experience for the members who really feel like it's important to be there. Without being there, the work wouldn't be as good or as possible. And it's a big learning curve for us. And I would say we're just at the start of this journey. And then it's complicated, of course, by the questions of the pandemic. But we found that in the virtual space, the kind of the network essential DNA has really started to rise for us a little bit. And it's just the literacy has just helped us a lot find what works and what doesn't work. I'll just pause there to say, to pause the comments there for the moment. Is there any, because I missed the audio, I didn't have audio for the first 2 or 3 minutes, Meg, and I actually missed your opening conversation, so I apologize for that. Is there anything in specific that I could address at this moment before I pass it back to Am?
Well, we have our framing questions for today. And for our panelists in particular, we're wondering how we can learn from other networks to grow an effective community among our Seizing the Moment participants. So, thinking about what are ingredients for success and some cautions, perhaps.
Yeah, so I could say a few words about this just in terms of the City Studio context, and maybe I'll start with that. City Studio is a partnership framework between municipalities and academic institutions. And the aim is to create a permanent communication and project channel between a municipality and all of its academic institutions. And then once you have that channel, you can put anything through it. And it's a kind of ongoing high-level MOU and collaborative framework. So that's how it works in any city. And then the city and the universities start to develop relationships around their priorities and around the capacities of the university across all departments at this university and all departments at the city. So it's a rich possibility in any city. The model itself I find it quite compelling. It's been my project for the last 10 years. But what we're starting to learn is, as we launch City Studios in new cities, the needs of the folks in their locality to connect with people across Canada doing exactly the same work has become so obvious now. That is that cities all have the same 12 problems. We all have energy waste. We all have clean air, clean water, food, and on and on. We all share these same 12 problems, but the priorities through the electoral politics system, the emphasis, depending upon how the issues are talked about in the locality, and then the way the problems are addressed in each city vary. So there's been a really strong interest in our network members talking about common problems with localized solutions. And that starts to seem to be a real sweet spot. That's one piece. The other piece is that there are these kind of meta issues that we're now starting to see interest on behalf of the network. One of them is the UN SDGs. I think that there's the kind of rise of the importance of this is very clear. And 10 years ago, in talking to university presidents, they started to see the SDGs coming up over the horizon for them. And in the last 2 or 3 years, the academic world is starting to see how they have to point their curricular content with relevance to the SDGs. Cities are, I would say, not as on it as universities at the moment, but I think it's inevitable. And so the interest around SDGs has become very strong and growing. And then, of course, the other issue of this, the kind of almost unknowable world about EDI, the equity, the diversity and inclusion world. We've started some conversations with our network members around what are we each doing in these areas? What are our big questions? And what are we learning from each other about practices and policies and on the ground work that we're all trying to do? Those I think are the two biggest things that are coming for us. But I'll just pass it over to Alex, who ran our network and continues to run it as she hands it over to our new network coordinator coming on soon. Alex, can you add to this question a little bit, perhaps?
Yeah, for sure. So in terms of learnings and what I've learned through running our network the past 2 years and through the pandemic is one, identifying the highly engaged members and then using them as momentum to help engage others. I found that if members are, sometimes easier to get other members engaged coming from a different member versus me trying to, as like the backbone organization, trying to get people to connect with one another. So really identifying those people and leveraging their influence in a really, I guess, strategic way. And so one of my goals has been like, I don't want everything coming through me. I want the members going directly to each other. Like that's part of the end goal for us. And then creating both like proactive and reactive engagement opportunities. So as presenting enticing opportunities for network members to connect to each other and reasons why they should, but then also providing and empowering them to bring forward ideas and then actually following through on those ideas so they feel empowered because I mean they know better than anyone else what they need, and you know at the beginning just asking members what they need and want, not assuming the best way to communicate, not assuming the topics they want to talk about, and actually learning that before developing and implementing a full-blown strategy that then no one wants to be a part of because you didn't ask what they wanted in the first place. So I'll stop there because I don't know all the time, but yeah, mostly just identifying those champions, leveraging their excitement, and then not making assumptions about needs and wants and asking your members instead.
Thank you. Dwayne, I think you're muted.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'll just add one more thing for that. Thank you, Alex. The thing that's become really clear for us, and it seems obvious in retrospect, and I think it's been this phenomenon has been a part of all of our lives, almost in every organization to some extent, but the gap that we're discovering and that we're trying to work within is this very strange, informal role of cruise director host for relationships. And you know, when you go to a house party or you go to an event and then someone greets you and say, oh, we're going to put your coat over here and you can get a refreshment over there. And I'd like to introduce you to Jane, and she does the same kind of work as you. That feeling of really being held through this as you enter into this new environment. We've thought about the City Studio Network in that way, and Alex has really taken on this role of the party host or the cruise director or the matchmaker. And I feel like you can take facilitation courses, but there really is a gap in the university education world for this cruise director role in culture. And I feel like it's almost like every interinstitutional relationship or every group of colleagues needs that kind of role in the middle. And I know Anne plays this role in Vancouver with the work that you're doing at the center and the media work that you're doing and the podcast that you're doing. Magda, when you connected with us, I could really tell that you were playing that role, and the evidence that we're all here is that it's really evidenced by that. I just think there's so much potential for that increasing role, active role, and a really well-funded role through different agencies in Canada. This kind of, for lack of a better word, it's a kind of a cruise director, party host.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for all of you at City Studio for sharing. I'm gonna move to Sarah Matsushito, the Director of Communications and Engagement at the Ontario Nonprofit Network. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Hi, everyone. It's so great to be here. I love talking about network building. This is the fun stuff. So this is a really great panel to be part of. Thank you. I'm joining from my home in Burlington, Ontario, and I'm very appreciative to live and work on this land in a territory that I'm working and living on, home to Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Wendat, and Mississaugas of the Credit, and also Métis Nation here in Burlington. So I want to acknowledge that as I begin my work. And for today, so in terms of ONN, a little bit about who we are as a network. We are about 10 years old, and we are a network for the 58,000 nonprofits and charities across Ontario of all sizes and focus. So as a 10-year-old kind of organization or group, our vision really is to support a thriving nonprofit sector. And we thought a network model is the best way to do this, given that it's such a diverse group of organizations and different geography, different communities served. So our focus is on public policy and advocacy. We also do resources and services to support organizations. Things like decent work and the labor force, data and evidence use, Right now, we're focused on racial justice and Indigenous justice, a very focused project. Also community wealth building around social enterprise. So a whole bunch of ranges of sort of public policy and or service focus. But I think the network style is really key for our engagement. And over the pandemic and through the pandemic, and as we move hopefully towards the rebuilding stage, we've grown a lot at our network in terms of our reach. And just to give you a bit of scope, we're about, we reach about 10,000 folks by email and about 35,000 on social media. But of course, there's 58,000. So there's a lot of organizations to reach. And we've grown a lot. And during the pandemic, we really realized we had to stay with, obviously, with our mission, but focusing on those policy issues that were popping up during the pandemic that were impacting nonprofits and charities, and changing some of our content focus and moving to more towards capacity building, because that's where the network was at. That's what they really needed. So listening to their needs. So I would say a couple of things around what we've learned over the years of network building, but also most recently during the pandemic, is really leaning into that network model. And Alex, you were mentioning this in terms of like, what does a network want? And it is exactly what that is, and also building the trust too. We found that so important to have that relationship building already there. And it's not that with this network, it's just one entity. This is a network, but there are many different groups within it, and learning who they are, who those champions are, those leaders within those groups is really helpful. For example, one of the ways, as one organization, we couldn't reach all 58,000 nonprofits and charities with, key updates on government relations, for example. So we leaned into our provincial association group of about 95 organizations, and through their members and their networks, they were able to amplify information, but also be a really helpful sounding point to then come back, bring information back to us to say, this is how our members are doing, this is what they're struggling with, this is what they really need. So having that kind of ear to the ground was so important, and not doing it on a one-by-one basis. And the network model certainly really helped us. Even regional nonprofit networks across Ontario helps us to find out what's happening on the ground. I would say too that we're also keeping in mind as we grow our network as a more kind of established network, we're always looking at, of course, our analytics and how we're growing, but also who's missing. So it's great to see, yes, we've grown in these ways with these groups or the geography or community served, but it's also who's not at the table. And that's something that we're really trying to intentionally think about to make sure that, for example, during the pandemic, we weren't able to see our northern and rural organizations in person, and those relationships don't build just by virtual alone. So it was really important for us to have that chance to think about new ways and who are our champions in those areas. Certainly too, we've also realized we're not reaching Black-led and serving organizations in Ontario. So working with partners who do other networks, and that was so important to be able to build those relationships further and to reach out. And then one last point that I would add is in terms of content sharing as a network. That knowledge sharing, of course, is so important, but I think we've learned over the years that it doesn't have to be perfect. It's always going to be iterative work, and that it's okay for us to release it once we've had some minds, experts coming around the table, and then release it with the framing that, yes, we're going to build on this. This isn't the final copy. And that is both a way for us to build that trust that we're going to be listening and incorporating information, but also that we can't wait until it's perfect, or our stuff will just never get out there. And then that we're wasting these opportunities for us in our network. Nonprofits need this support now. If we take too long to create that knowledge sharing or the content, we're going to miss folks, and they're going to miss the chance to help them, but also miss the chance to really hear some valuable content and feedback from the network. So those are three things that I would say in terms of what we've learned most recently in our network building.
Thanks so much, Sarah. I'm going to next ask Elena Harrison, the Director of Strategic Initiatives with Inclusion Saskatchewan. She's rocking the purple wallpaper, as I mentioned earlier, but welcome, Elena.
Thank you so much. Yes, I'm calling to you from my bedroom, which is situated in the territory known as Treaty 4. I live in Regina, Saskatchewan, and yes, my whole family is in isolation, so doors locked. This is how we roll these days. So with that out of the way, most of my experience working in the area of community-based research has been as the community partner, and has been sort of project based. So it's got hopefully a start and an end date. And so I thought maybe what I would do is just sort of go through what I've learned a little bit in my experience, ranging from extremely positive and effective networks to ones that were on the verge of just falling apart. So I think the first thing that I would say is really important is to acknowledge the areas of expertise that you want to have as part of your network, and really work to those strengths. So for example, if we're in an academic partner, I'm going to be looking for somebody who is really strong with methodology and hopefully quantitative analysis, because I don't have those skills. But I also think it's really important for academic partners to acknowledge that their community folks are going to have a special skill set and a familiarity with the population served, that we want to engage in research that they just won't have. And so not to sell short your own understanding of the needs of the community. So just a little bit more on sort of the academic engagement range that we've had. So it has gone from, engaged at the beginning to completely absent at the end, to, somebody being just, sort of in the background as an advisor and providing, feedback as needed. And that actually worked pretty well. One of the projects that I'm engaged in right now is looking at the area of medical decision making for individuals with intellectual disabilities. And we right now have an academic partner who is so engaged, so motivated, and it makes all the difference in the world. She knows what her area of expertise is. She knows what ours is, and it's just a very, very functional relationship. So that's excellent. I think it's really important to establish at the beginning a commitment from each team member and an undertaking to see the project through to the end. I mentioned we had one where the partners just sort of fell off one by one, and it was very, very hard to get to that finish line. So you want to make sure that people will prioritize it from the get-go. And if you see that there are members that just come to the meeting and don't contribute, I think it's really important to just cut the fat, which is a little bit harsh to say. But if you're having to run through, so many people on your network that aren't really contributing, but you maybe are waiting for feedback from them, it's not serving anybody. It's going to weigh us down. Establishing a really good work plan with clear responsibility and timelines. Oh my goodness, so important, crucial to the work for everybody. And here's something I have had to learn the hard way, that when your other team members are not doing something, don't keep volunteering to do it yourself, because that is, again, not a good way to structure a network. That's not a network. And so learning to delegate to the people who have agreed to take on certain aspects. Pre-scheduling regular meetings. So important, especially now that everything is being done remotely. Just set up that timeline, put it in everyone's calendars, and have them agree to that ahead of time, I think. And not to let things sit. We had a situation where a researcher had some personal things going on, and so we waited for a while. Went to the researcher and said, okay, like this is really getting to be a little bit long, like we need to wrap this up. Oh, but I really, really want to continue on it. Like I will be able to in a few months. Okay, so we give more time. And in the end, she didn't end up coming back to the project, and we were, I don't know, probably a year behind at this point. So I think it's just, you're recognizing your project is important. It should be a priority, even though it's community-based research, and say, you've committed to this, and we need you to, follow through on that, make it the priority that we see it as. So don't forget to hire students. That's been such a helpful thing. Us in nonprofit organizations are always doing a million things, and research gets done off the side of our desk. So, really engaging with students is a great opportunity, and it's been a really successful model for us. Make dissemination exciting. This is huge, for sure. Back when I worked for a nonprofit that we did a lot of work on housing and homelessness, and we created a video, and we had community viewings in different parts of the community, and thousands of people saw that video because they were just, this is a different way to present research. Let's go and have a community discussion on it, and it worked really, really well. So just kind of to look at things from a different perspective. Another one that we did was produce some infographics that were then released over social media to sort of build momentum, and that was really successful as well. And then last, and this is coming from a place of, my experience working with our organization in particular, is to actively and sincerely involve members of the community in every aspect of the research. We have an incredible group of very dedicated self-advocates who are adults who experience intellectual disability, and they are so crucial to the work that we are doing to actually make sure that it is serving them in the way that they need to be served, and that it's improving the community for them. So that just creates such a richness of process, and the network is just strengthened by having that really important and sincere involvement. So that's all for me so far.
Thanks so much, Elena. And next up, we have Robin East, the founder of Barrier Free Saskatchewan. Welcome, Robin.
Well, thank you very much. I am coming from, I guess we are virtually on all the territories of the treaty lands, the various nations and homeland of the Métis. And one of the pieces that we like to discuss at every meeting is part of the Truth and Reconciliation aspect, because it's so vitally important for Canadians, but even for individuals around our small table. And some of those pieces do need to come up and be brought up. So as a settler, that's one of the pieces that I bring forward at each meeting, and talk about any type of item that has been in the media, and just get a general piece going and recognizing where that is coming from, because it's important to be inclusive in regards to who we are as community and how we're going to move forward. I am currently in my ham shack and my model railroad room, my office work room, and also my volunteer work room. So I self-identify as a person with a characteristic of blindness, and so that is my disability, and I am totally blind. The pieces that everybody have spoke on are all so very vital to organizations, and I have belonged to several over the decades and still belong to many. The aspect that I want to talk about, I think, is what was first started with, and that is glue, and that's the word that I use. And so at every meeting that we have, I think it's important that someone, and in this case it's I that have taken this on, and it's the whole aspect of ensuring that each member around the table feels that they're there as a contributing member, because if they feel like they're deadwood, they're not going to be there very long. They've all come to the table for a reason, And it's up to the group to figure out why each person is there, but more importantly, it's up to the person that is the glue to find out why they're there at the table and to see if that's the proper fit for them. And if it's not, maybe they need to go and maybe someone else needs to come to the table. But more often than not, there is a good reason for them to be there. And it's a matter of finding what it is and helping them blend into the team, as you will, so that we can all move forward with whatever piece that we want to work on. So at every meeting that we have, we start off with introductions where we allow opportunity for people to be able to identify pieces of themselves that are important. So when they introduce themselves, they can describe the room they're in. They can identify their disability. They can identify other groups of which they may belong, whether they can identify whether they have light skin tone or whether they have dark skin tone. They can do whatever they want because it's an open and safe place, but it's important for the opportunity for them to be able to come out and identify with the group in however they want to do that in a very safe environment. We do the a harassment policy just to make sure that everybody's clear that we address things very respectfully and with dignity. And of course, we do the land acknowledgements. From there, we just move into our agenda and march forward on the items. For me, it's important that each individual that we have around the table feels that they're welcome and feels that they can contribute in whichever way they can. And some people are very vocal, and those are what I would call, as the old words, the extroverts, and then there are the introverts. So regardless of how you interact, you've got to pull out the people that are very quiet and see where they're at. Let them have that contribution piece and give them that opportunity. Sometimes that's not straight away. That's not at that meeting. And sometimes you'll get an email later about a piece that they wanted to put in because they need to sit back and think about it. Then we have the extroverts where sometimes they're kind of off the wall sometimes and they just want to get going and get things done. And so we have to slow them down and help them pull everybody else along. So it's a matter of all of those pieces coming together to ensure that the group knows why they're at the table and where they're going. And so with that, it's extremely important to have your mandate, your mission statements. It's important to know where you're going, how you're going to get there. It's important to have your various milestones, very short-term ones, medium ones, and long-term goals. You need all of those. And then it's extremely important to celebrate those successes at every single meeting. Whether you send a letter to the government on the medical triage protocol, whether you challenge an article in regards to the word settler and whether that's offensive or not, and then you have that discussion, even though that might not be part of the mandate of your group, it's part of the inclusivity piece that helps bring everybody together and feel very welcome to the group so they can move on. Our main motto is that an advocate is like a catalyst that mixes with an ally and inspires empowerment. And when we look at that definition, we know that one person cannot do it. We always have to bring in an ally, whether that's another person, whether that's a number of people, whether that's a number of groups. But we can't do it alone. We can certainly plant the seed. We can certainly start things off, but we just cannot do it by ourselves. And that's an important piece within our group, is that everybody knows they have the power to bring things up, and to have that empowerment is very important, because they know that if they bring it up, they don't have to deal with that issue alone, and they will have a group that can help manipulate that issue and work to some type of resolution and work out some type of a solution to get things underway and going. So for me, the most important piece to all of this was the item that came out right at the beginning, and that is the glue in regards to the group that's around your table, and that's important, whether it's a national organization or a local one, whether it's a not-for-profit charitable organization or a not-for-profit that's not a charitable organization, or even an organization that isn't or doesn't have or hasn't become a legal entity, if you will. And all of those groups have pros and cons in regards to how they've become, whether they become an incorporated group, whether they become a charitable or just a not-for-profit, or whether they're simply an organization of like-minded folks that want to address some issues within their community. But all of those pieces are important. It's just a matter of pulling everybody together and moving forward. And every single individual around the table has to understand that they are important and they're there for a specific reason. And we want to utilize their talent because they're a valuable resource. That's how Barrier Free Saskatchewan has been working over the last number of years. And frankly, we've been very, very successful in what we've been doing and where we're going, because we consistently stick to that, and we come back and address issues that we may have slacked off on. We bring them back and say, hey, we haven't addressed this. This was supposed to be part of this committee, but we're not seeing any results. What's going on with that? Do you need more help? Because it could be a time-sensitive piece. So how do we start addressing that to move things forward and get things underway? The last piece of all of this is the mentoring and what's the word I'm looking for? The whole aspect of ensuring that not one person makes the difference within the group. Everybody in the group is there and they make that group. It's not Robin's group. It's not, Sue's group. It is, the group belongs to everybody. Everybody has to have that ownership and take that obligation and responsibility. And if they're not, then that's when the chair or the president or whoever is taking that on needs to sit down and have a chat with that person to say, is this the right place for you? Because A, B, and C, and just move forward. Maybe it is, and it might be that there's another way that they can participate. So we work that part out. So to me, all of this comes back to the glue. And when we go with the glue, and we want to expand out to networks, we have to understand how other organizations work. So for us at Barrier Free Saskatchewan, if we want to advocate to the province of particular issues, we have to understand that other not-for-profits might be getting their sole source of money from the government, and they would fear to speak out because they don't want to somehow be found that they're no longer getting funded the next time the budgets come out. And so we have to find a way for other organizations to be able to network with us to advocate in their own way so that they don't lose their funding, but also so that we can move the various agendas forward. So when you're networking, you need to also start understanding what those other groups are, how they're going to be able to help you, how you can help them, because it's always a two or a three-way street, if you will. So I think I've already passed my 5-minute mark, so I do apologize for that. But I always come back to the aspect of the glue. That adhesive is important. And the term we constantly use is, how do we move this solution that we're coming up with past the sticky part of the envelope? Because if you're still on the envelope, it's no good. We got to get past that sticky part or the gummy part of the envelope in order to see a real difference and to affect change. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Robin. I think weaving through all of your presentations and thoughtful discussion and interventions, there's, how do we build a thriving network is a big question. How do we be inclusive? And also this interface between our public systems and communities still remains kind of problematic, even inside of universities or within civil society organizations. How do we build power through networking in a proper sense, that the resources in place to build those networks and keep them thriving oftentimes aren't there. And so this tends to be exhaustive work, tends to fall on particular individuals, or in a way that we're not building the kind of community that we're looking for. We have some time for discussion and some of the lead questions, and we're going to open it up to everyone here. There is a raise hand function under the reactions area. If you could use that, it would be great. But the questions that we posed are: what can we learn from other successful networks to grow an effective knowledge sharing community among seizing the moment participants? What are the ingredients for success? And what would you caution not to do? Those are really good questions. Having had a long history of working in obscure left-wing splinter groups at the margins and periphery of society, I've seen all sorts of things work and not work and that type of thing. So I'm opening it up to everyone. Dwayne, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. And it's really fascinating hearing from the other perspectives about networks, and really refreshing. One of the things, this is a bit controversial, perhaps, or maybe not controversial. Maybe it's controversial for myself, but one of the things we focused on in the past 10 years as we built City Studios, we worked with the Social Venture Institute network out here in BC. It's based in Hollyhock, and it's a gathering of 150 people every year from different places, different sectors that are really trying to green the organization, so to speak, and create equity at the center of organizations. And one of the things it does is it blends the best of kind of progressive politics with the best of business tools. And I was thinking about, we're doing this inside our own organization now as we build the network and strengthen the network. We're starting to use very conventional marketing tools. The network is a product, so to speak, and the network members are customers. They have a customer journey about awareness all the way through advocacy, all the classic customer journey or buyer's journey. And we're really starting to walk through that process quite delicately. And what can we learn about what the mindset of a customer is that helps us build the network? How do we market the network as a product that matters to people and that makes their lives better? And how do we identify the need that creates a kind of group? Like, what need do we all have that creates a de facto group? And then what is a product that could fulfill that need? I'm always a little hesitant to talk in these terms because, sometimes it's received a bit negatively. I would say that it's this, this work isn't about business, but I think there's so much we can learn from the tools of business and the deep work that business sector has done around using the tools and whatnot for good.
Thanks, Dwayne. And I would say, even I'm currently doing some work more in theory and philosophy around friendship and community, and there's lots of discussions around porosity and openness and solidarity that gets into the same territory. So I think by virtue of building a network which needs to be wide and open and centered, that multidisciplinary approaches are deeply instructive. I think sometimes that language can have a link to neoliberal critiques of the university and all of that. So for some people it might not land down in a proper sense, but for some people it's an opening. And so if we're trying to build a network, we need to be open to different means of approaching and bringing people in. Anyone else? Or would any of the panelists like to respond to that in any way?
I'll just mention, just making sure, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, for some reason, my Zoom interface is a little bit funny looking, so hopefully I can stay on. Lynn has kindly been, because my chat is not visible to me right now, has kindly texted me a message in the chat from Mike Desjardins, and I could read that question out perhaps, and we'll see if anyone wants to comment. Beyond specific projects with clear timelines, How might campuses support community in longer-term work that involves system change and requires sustainability? What might campuses be able to offer community? So yeah, that's a great question around that longer-term sustainable approach.
Space.
It's Robin speaking. I apologize for not raising my hand on this one, but I want to touch base with what Dwayne had said. And one of the pieces from business that I think most organizations do not do or really struggle with, and that is marketing who they are and what they want. And that is a huge issue where business takes that on and strives. If not, they're out of business. Organizations, whether you're not for profit or whatever, we just keep surviving, even though we're not doing that marketing piece. And sometimes one really struggles. And so the building of a way to market yourself within community and beyond is an extremely important piece. And I think that is something that we really need to take from business and own it ourselves. And we need to build some type of structure around that, which will be easy for folks to use. So we need to somehow template some type of marketing systems for not-for-profits or small groups or organizations within academia and so on, so that we can then take that marketing piece and absolutely move into various networks and tie into them. Because without that, we sometimes struggle in getting our message out, and we're not hearing the other messages from those other groups. And it's all comes down to that whole piece on marketing and communication.
Thanks, Robin. Sarah, I have you next.
Sure. And I would echo that too, Robin. I think it's about building a narrative. Like what is the purpose of your network? Why do you exist? And what do you do for others? It's not about just what your network wants. And I think that systemic change piece is so important to be able to gather more support for what you do. I'd also say too that for the question around how do campuses support community, I know from our experience, a couple of things. I think that the research and data is something that communities often don't have access to, don't have the resources to do. So if campuses can provide that, is so valuable to be able to raise your hand and say, we can do this, we can provide what that you need. We can identify groups, so you can gather it. I think the other part though is the knowledge mobilization. It's great to have the data, it's great to have the information, but then for community to have to group, especially to have to turn that into, if you will, a product or resources is really labor intensive. There's also an expense to it as well. Often if you're trying to create pieces, whether it's video, infographics, toolkits, etc. So having that support is really practical, so that knowledge mobilization can be put into action in different ways for communities to then share it with their communities or whoever the groups that they're working with. So those are 2 points I think would be really helpful from what we know from nonprofits and community groups.
Thanks, Sarah. I'm going to go to Elena next.
Just one point that I wanted to make about what work is already occurring, but has been just tremendously helpful. So Lynn is just such an incredible connector, and talking about glue, that is absolutely the role that she plays. And one part of the work that she engages in is in offering professional development opportunities to, well, mostly the people that are taking her up on it would be within the nonprofit sector, but like, as anybody knows who works in this area, the funding for professional development in our sector is nil, pretty much. And so to try and professionalize and, you know, learn skills like program evaluation that are just so crucial. I think our Community Engagement and Research Center at the U of R has just been incredibly empowering and inspiring to leaders within the nonprofit sector. And I think that work is, oh, I can't even say enough about it. she's amazing, and those opportunities are amazing. And I hope that they keep coming. I take advantage of as many as I can.
Thank you so much. And Dwayne in the chat has volunteered Suparna to share some thoughts on campus community experience. Suparna, are you up for that?
Sure. So I did a project with City Studio back in fall 2018 when I was doing my post-degree in marketing management. And that project was to spread awareness about the settlement agencies in Vancouver. And that was a course project. It was a collaboration between City Studio and Langara College. But later on, that project was actually funded by the City of Vancouver to implement the strategy all over the Vancouver with settlement agencies. And later on, I was hired by one of the agency to work in their marketing team. I guess that was, I was an international student, and being an international student, it's very difficult to find these opportunities to enter the job market, to make the networking connections. But because of this opportunity that I had, and I was introduced to right people, and I entered the market, I got introduced to this whole professional network, which is very difficult for other international students to figure out. And especially in a post-pandemic world, it's really challenging to have those experiences and to encounter all those challenges. So yeah, I would say that City Studio, that project collaboration was the highlight of my whole academic career that I had, like the whole journey that I had. So yeah, that was my experience with it.
Thanks. So one other observation I wanted to share, just sort of related to universities in general, but I think they could apply it to larger public institutions in as much as community engagement positions have been created to play this kind of mediating role between university and community. I would say after almost 11 years, December 13th will be 11 years in this role, most of the interesting work that I've been able to do has been done by smuggling things into the institution and smuggling things outside of the institution, outside of the realm of legibility of teaching and research. It comes from community organizing and figuring out other ways to do that when the community demands, how do we look at ethics from a community perspective rather than a university perspective? It's finding small bits of resources so they can produce that work. And in some sense, we haven't fully gotten to the benefits of this type of work if we're continuing to do it on the margins and the periphery. And also there's a problem of the politics of mediation when these types of activities happen in particular roles, in the sense they have to go through people, and without those relationships in place, you oftentimes have these roles mediating those spaces. And in some sense that needs to be more democratic and shared as well. But that's maybe time for another webinar. I'm going to pass it back to Magda to help us close here.
Okay, thanks so much, Am, and thanks everyone who was a part of our panel today. I was furiously jotting notes down as you all spoke. There was lots to take in there. And I really look forward to thinking about that, what was spoken today, and next steps potentially to keep this conversation going among a network. And I know Lynn, Amber, and I are really thinking about that quite a bit. So we'll have some next steps to think about in that regard. And so we're going to be making a link to this recording available on the Seizing the Moment webpage, but we will let all of you know when that becomes available. We'll send out an email about that. And I'll just conclude now as well by inviting you all to our next online session in our Seizing the Moment series. It's titled Designing a Pan-Canadian Proposal to Activate Ideas from the Seizing the Moment project. That's going to be held on November 24th between 1 and 2 Eastern Time. And during that event, we're going to be having a conversation about opportunities to develop an action research project to build on these conversations. So we've had so many things to talk about and we've learned so much. Now, how can we perhaps apply it, whether in demonstration projects or thinking about policy or other ways of working on this. So there's going to be registration available through Eventbrite, and a link will be sent to everyone who's attending this as well, in case you'd like to join us. And if you would like to learn about this or any of our other initiatives within Community Campus Engage Canada, please do feel free to reach out to me. I can be reached at info@ccecanada.ca. As I said, we have lots going on with this project underway. I've certainly, and I know Lynn and Amber would agree, we've had such a great opportunity to meet so many new participants in this effort. So we now have, a network that we want to really continue this specific conversation around what's been learned during the pandemic. What do we want to prioritize in terms of things to think about, things to talk about, who might we include, and how might we continue on with different activities? As I said, perhaps through a proposal for future research into 2022. So I just wanted to thank you all again. It's been wonderful to hear from all the panelists, and I really enjoyed this conversation today. So thanks so much to all of you.